Yeah, so I'm actually going to talk about opinion dynamics for agents with resource limitations. So as I said, this is some area that is a new interest for me and my group. Largely, otherwise we work in control theory, decision theory, and so on, primarily from an engineering systems point of view. But more recently, this is something that is interesting us. Of course, I think maybe it's a mixed audience, but even then, I think explaining what opinion dynamics is, or the kind of questions that we may be interested in, is probably not so much required for this audience. But very quickly, right? I mean, we all are aware that in social groups, we observe various different kinds of phenomena, right? So sometimes there is consensus, sometimes there is clustering of opinions. And in an extreme situation, maybe even some polarization of opinions, right? And sometimes there could also be some oscillations of these opinions and so on, right? In such social settings, we might also want to identify the individual or individuals who have the most social power or most influence and so on. So these are some questions that we may be interested in from analysis point of view. Perhaps from a design point of view, we might not or might care about also thinking about how to manipulate opinions and so on, right? Or how to perhaps prevent manipulation of opinions in a social network and so on. So yeah, I mean, we have all these interesting motivations and so on. And of course, I think there were a couple of talks, at least one yesterday, on voter models and so on. But in this talk, I'm not going to talk about discrete opinions about discrete choices in that sense. So rather, we are going to think about opinions in a continuous sense. So these opinions belong to real numbers, essentially. And very broadly, you can think of them as something like this. So if x is equal to 0, then it's sort of like a neutral opinion. And if x is negative, it's like an opposing opinion, and x positive means favorable opinion. And the magnitude sort of it indicates the magnitude with which these opinions are held. So you can think of them that way. Or alternatively, you can also think in the sense of, like, let's say if these opinions are modeling how much money, let's say, somebody wants to put in a certain project or something like that, right? So then certainly it makes sense to model them as real numbers. Okay, so of course we are also interested in modeling social connections among these agents, and we do it in a usual way. So let's say we have a social network, and then we have peer-to-peer connections between every pair of agents. We may or may not have connections between every pair of agents, or at least some pairs of agents have connections between them. And these connections could also be, let's say, friendly in nature, but they could also be antagonistic in nature, right? So because of that, we adopt directed sign graphs to describe these connections. Very quickly, it's a very quick literature survey or review of these opinion dynamics. Some of the earliest models that many of these papers in this subliterature, they go back to, let's say, French de Groot model and so on. So they are, I think, from late 60s and 70s and so on. And then after that, there were additional models which sort of incorporated stubbornness, etc. Right? So the de Groot models and Abelson's model, they're really consensus models. Okay, but later people observe that, okay, fine. I mean, maybe people are not always seeking to achieve consensus. So there is also some stubbornness that is displayed and so on. And that could be then modeled in these things. Yes, there are many different variations, including randomized gossip and so on. And for example, this one, bounded confidence model, is specifically Hexelman cross model. So in this, there is no specific social network. There's no one static social network that is valid for all time. Rather, in some sense, the social network is dependent on the state itself, state of all the opinions of all the agents. And in some sense, the agents sort of interact with other agents whose opinions are within a certain confidence bound and so on. Okay, so that is the kind of models that existed. To explain polarization, Altafini and others, they have also come up with certain models, particularly ones involving directed sign graphs and so on. Yeah, and more recently, there are also some works related to self-appraisal, which are some works done by Digrud, Fredkin, and so on. And these include, let's say, things like agents have opinion dynamics running on one level, and on a higher level, they are also seeking to maximize their social power and so on by adapting their self-appraisal weights and so on. So one thing about all this literature is that largely these opinion dynamics, they're just proposed with some possibly sociological motivations and modeling some sociological observations and so on. But really there wasn't really a game theoretic background to these models as such. So more recently, there has been some interest in coming up with game theoretic approaches to modeling opinion dynamics or analyzing existing models of opinion dynamics from a game theoretic point of view. Okay, so I have listed a few such works, and our work is also broadly in this spirit. We want to model opinion dynamics from a game theoretic point of view and then analyze them and so on. The specific motivation for our work comes from you could say, a very loose observation that resources broadly influence the opinions and social power in social networks, right? So this picture is sort of illustrating one aspect of that, I guess. So this is from a couple of years back, I believe, when Elon Musk sort of updated his Twitter profile, I think bio or something like that, to hashtag Bitcoin. And that led to the Bitcoin price shooting up in a very, very short span of time. So this sort of suggests that perhaps given that Elon Musk has such vast resources, in particular wealth, and he is expressing interest in Bitcoin, so then that could have led to many people believing that Bitcoin price would rise, because if he's putting in money, and he'll probably put in a lot of money, and that could probably result in price rise. Okay, so that is one way resources could influence opinions in a social network. There are other settings also where resources could, for example, restrict extreme opinions. Here's just an example. So let's say there are a bunch of agents bidding for, let's say, house or something like that, or perhaps, it's just like some people want to buy some good, right? So then they might have some certain resource limitations or budgets, and that might limit the maximum bid or the maximum price that they're willing to pay for a product or a bid for something and so on. So the specific work that I'm going to present today is, I think it fits more in line with this example rather than that one. And so we are trying to we'll try to model the resource limitations, and we'll start off from a game theoretic interpretation of it, and then we'll derive certain opinion dynamics out of it. So let's dive into some details. So we have a bunch of agents, 1 through n, and they're sort of discussing some single topic, right? So they have opinions on a single topic, and these opinions are evolving perhaps and so on. We denote this Zi of t, or rather we use Zi of t to denote the opinion of agent I at time t. Pi is its internal preference on that topic, right? So for example, Pi, it could model a whole bunch of different things. Pi, if it is taken as the initial condition of Zi, then it could model stubbornness, but also for some reason, let us say this Pi is a preferred opinion of Zi, then that could also be captured by this parameter. The resources that are there for agent I, that itself is denoted by Ri here, and Wi is the importance that agent I attaches to its preference. In certain contexts, it could also be a parameter that describes its stubbornness. These AIKs are the influence weights, in particular the influence weight of agent K on agent I, and in particular if K is a friend of I, then AIK is positive and AIK is negative if it is an enemy or it has an antagonistic relation. Yes. It could be unidirectional, it could be bidirectional also, and if it is bidirectional, the weights could still be different. That is, AIK could be different from AKI. That is possible. And AIK could be 0, whereas AKI could be non-zero. That is also possible. Yes. So preference, for example, you think of, let's say if you're thinking in terms of these opinions modeling, how much you would like to pay for a certain product that you want to buy, right? So PI it could be like your internal valuation of that product, how valuable it is to you or something like that. Whereas ZI is the price that you are ultimately willing to pay. For example, you may not be very confident in your valuation of the product, because of which you're taking inputs from your social network. And with that added information, you could end up paying more or less, as an example. Oh yeah, yeah, the opinions could be different, yes. The opinions, they are also changing over time, right? Even for a single agent, they're changing over time. In general, yeah, they could be different. Okay, can I proceed? Okay, so then for each agent I, we assume that there's a utility function. In particular, it is this one. We chose this utility function basically because it's probably the easiest to work with, but one can generalize this idea and go on to do these things for other utility functions too. So I'll just explain what each of these three terms are doing. The first one is penalizing deviation from its internal preference. So the assumption is that agent I is trying to maximize its utility function. So the second term is penalizing deviation from or closeness to neighbors' opinions, and that depends on the signs of these AIKs. So if the AIK is positive, then it is penalizing deviation, and if AIK is negative, it is in fact penalizing closeness to these neighbors' opinions. And this last term is it's sort of like a resource penalty. It's penalizing extreme opinions. So instead of imposing a hard constraint, we are sort of imposing a penalty on the resources that are being used or that the agent wants to use. So now the opinion dynamics itself is derived out of these utility functions. Essentially, we assume that each agent myopically seeks to maximize its utility function by revising its opinion Zi in the gradient ascent direction of Ui, right, with respect to Zi itself. Okay, so that's how we get the opinion dynamics, and that's how it looks like. We find it convenient to split off these terms in this dynamics into two parts. This so-called self function Si of Zi and this social function Ci of Z. The self function depends on its own opinion and its internal parameters essentially. So that's why we're calling it a self function. No, it could be concave. It partly depends on these AIKs. In general, it is not. In general, it is not. Yes. So what motivates to the power of 4 in the last term? Basically, because we want this resource, we want these resources. Essentially, we are thinking of resource limitation, right? So if Zi is too large, then it should not. I mean, you think of it as like a proxy for a hard constraint, right? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right, I think I have about 9 minutes, so I need to rush. So, right, so if we look at the self function, it is a very nice function. It is strictly decreasing, and in fact, it has a unique root, so we can exploit this, in fact, in our analysis. So, right, and so that is Mi, right? Okay, so, and you can interpret this Mi as the opinion that agent I would hold if it was isolated from social influence. The script E is the set of equilibria of the opinion dynamics. I'll talk about it in a couple of slides. So broadly, yes, we can think of it as, on this agent I, a couple of different forces are acting. This so-called self force or force due to self term, and this social term. I think that is somewhat obvious, so I'll go ahead. Okay, so one of the first main results is that we have ultimate boundedness of the opinions under this opinion dynamics. Okay, so it's sort of like a basic sanity check for what we set out to model in our dynamics and in our opinion formation scenario, right? And it is really being achieved by this quartic term in the utility function, right? Or in the corresponding cubic term in the opinion dynamics. It forces the opinions to sort of reduce in magnitude. Right. Now we can also talk about the equilibrium points. In general, there need not be a unique equilibrium point. There may be multiple equilibrium points, but what we can say is there exists a unique equilibrium point under a specific setting. So let's say if this NIE is the set of enemies of agent I, that is the agents who have a negative influence on agent I. So if we use that notation, so then what this assumption is saying is that if we have weak antagonistic relations, right, or weak antagonistic influences on each agent I, then we can guarantee that there exists a unique equilibrium point, which also happens to be globally exponentially stable, right? So that is what this statement is saying. Now, in particular, if we have no antagonistic relations, then we can say a lot more about this ultimate bound, right? So we have these MIs, which are the roots of the self functions, if you recall. And if you look at that, then essentially, then you can essentially talk about the ultimate bound in terms of that mn, mmax raised to n, that set, right? So in particular, you can say that z of t converges to that positively invariant set m raised to n, and it also converges to the interior of that set mn if all agents who have mmax or mi equal to mmax, they are directly or indirectly influenced by other agents whose mi is less than mmax, and similarly for mmin, right? So right. And in particular, actually, if the social network is strongly connected, it satisfies this assumption, and in that case we can show that we have convergence to the interior of this mn. So as I talked about in the first couple of slides, consensus is a very interesting problem, and people care about this in opinion dynamics as in perhaps in many other domains. And right, so we can also analyze when that would occur. In this opinion dynamics, consensus would occur if and only if all these MIs are equal to some alpha, right? So basically all the MIs are the same. Only then we'll have consensus. And if we have consensus, then we can say something nice, right? So at consensus, so we look at the so-called dominance weight, which is this product of Wi and Ri, right? So it is looking at the weight that the agent I gives to its own internal preference times the resource that it has. And based on that, we can say this: if sigma I is less than sigma j, then the distance of this consensus value from its preference, internal preference rather, is smaller, or rather it is greater compared to if sigma j were to be less than greater than sigma I. So that is, if you could say if the dominance weight is greater, then the consensus value is closer to its internal preference. So that is what it is saying. So this is a very nice interpretation that we have here. As I said, we can also think of the underlying gain, right? So of course, I mean, for each agent, we have these utility functions that we started out with. And okay, so I don't need to talk about this Nash equilibrium and so on. But because we are really updating, or the agents are updating their opinions based on the gradient, we have to think about a local notion of Nash equilibrium I won't go into the specifics of it, but the basic idea is the same. Essentially, it's like a Nash equilibrium, but if you restrict the strategy set to a neighborhood of that Z star. So from their definitions, we can immediately say that the set of Nash equilibria has to be a subset of set of local Nash equilibria. And in this particular problem, this local Nash equilibria also turn out to be equilibrium points for our dynamics. And now we can say something nice, or we can say something specific about these Nash equilibria in our dynamics. So we have this tau I, which is sort of related to the in degree of each node defined in this way, right? And so what we can say is, if we have an equilibrium point of the opinion dynamics, Z star, right? So that is also local Nash equilibrium only if the Zi star is greater than tau I. So it is relating something about this Zi star and the in degree of each node. And if this inequality is strict, then we can say that Z star is indeed actually a Nash equilibrium. If there exists an I such that tau I is greater than eta square, then we can say that there exists no local Nash equilibrium and so on. And if the in degree is greater than or equal to 0, so that is sort of corresponding to weak antagonistic relations. So then in that case, we can say that all these three sets are the same. The set of equilibrium, set of Nash equilibria, and set of local Nash equilibria, they're all the same. Actually, I think I jumped ahead. So this is a specific scenario of that one. And in this case, actually, we can also say that there is a unique Nash equilibrium. So, and from previous results, we can in fact also say that the opinion dynamics converges to this unique Nash equilibrium. We also did some price of anarchy analysis for these two objective functions, egalitarian and utilitarian objective functions. And we did this analysis based on this so-called satisfaction ratio. So we define a satisfaction ratio for each agent given an opinion profile, and we define it in this way. So it is basically the cost, and we write it in terms of cost rather than the utility functions itself, right? So it is the cost that the ith agent is incurring at that opinion profile divided by the minimum cost that the ith agent would incur if it were to choose, if it could choose the entire opinion profile on its own, right? So that is a satisfaction ratio. And based on this, we sort of said something nice about price of anarchy. So I'll speed things up a bit. I think I'll talk about this one observation. That is basically, if we have a consensus equilibrium, then in that case, the price of anarchy for either of the objectives is actually equal to 1. So in that case, everyone is actually satisfied with the outcome, right? So this is the last thing that we sort of analyzed in this model. In certain situations, we can even have periodic behavior of these opinions. And for this to occur, it is necessary for at least one agent to be sufficiently contrarian, right? Or contrarian, because we are restricting our analysis to two agents. And what this means is essentially that there is at least one agent who is antagonistically influenced, right? And we also sort of talked about some sufficient conditions for Hopf bifurcation to exist and so on. So I'll close it. So I'd like to thank Prashil, my student. In fact, he's contributed a great deal to this paper. And actually, these slides are also made by him. I sort of borrowed them for this talk. And these are the other collaborators on this paper, Nirabro Mandal and Sonia Martinez at UCSD. Thank CRB for funding. So if you are interested, you can check out this recent paper of ours. Thank you.
Questions?
So where are you getting that alpha from? Because you're using alpha in a number of.
Which alpha? Where could you?
It was after.
Here, no. This one?
Yeah.
This one? Yeah, the alpha over there? Could you remind me where you saw alpha?
Can you go later? I mean,
Go
it's-
forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
The previous slide.
Okay. Here? Here, this one?
Yes.
That is the case when there's consensus. So consensus, so everybody is agreeing, right? So it's just saying that Zi star is equal to alpha.
What is this alpha?
It could be anything, right? So all we are saying is that if there is a consensus equilibrium, so by the way, I mean, in one of the previous results, we said that consensus is possible if and only if all these, basically all these Zi star, they are equal to Mi, and all the Mi's are equal to this alpha. So they are the roots of the self functions essentially. Mi is the root of the self function, if you remember.
Okay.
Right? So if we go back, so in the opinion dynamics, we split off these terms into two parts: the self function, right? So and that has a unique root Mi. So we have consensus if and only if all these Mi's are equal, right? So that common value is this alpha.
And you're considering two types of network. One is fully connected and one is some degree you talked about.
No. All these results hold for an arbitrary network.
But in one of the results, it was said that if it is
Maybe, okay. Perhaps in that Nash equilibrium one,
previous slide.
I might have talked about a specific scenario as a special case. Is it here?
Yes.
Is strongly connected, I said. I didn't say fully connected. Strongly connected. That is, you can go from any node to any node via directed path. That's what I mean. Okay.
Well, I may have a quick one. So at the end, when you showed oscillations, are the limit cycle type or this center type? I mean,
it's a limit cycle. In fact, we have shown that there is a Hopf bifurcation occurring and so on.
And just in your model setup, so when I talk about classical games and it comes to strategies, it usually means I have something to choose from and I choose.
Yes.
What does it mean here that I have many opinions to choose from and I choose an opinion? Z being the strategy here.
So the strategy set is really the entire real line.
But mentally, I mean, I have many. I mean, is it like, I mean, if I have an opinion, I have an opinion. What does it mean that I may have many opinions? I'm going to choose this opinion, that opinion. Is there
opinion is Zi of t at time
t.
t.
Zi is the analogy of strategy here, right?
Yes, you could think of it that way. Yes.
So then, how do I understand?
So is the opinion
is it just mathematical analogy or is it even conceptually the correct analogy?
No, opinion could be thought of as strategy.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And it is coming from the strategy set. In this case, it turns out to be.
I understand, but physically,
yes.
I'm saying if something is happening, I have opinion about it. What does it mean that I can have many opinions about it and I'm going to choose one from it, physically speaking?
So as I explained, so of course, I mean, perhaps we cannot model every type of opinion dynamics with this, but at least let's say in kind of situations where the opinion is about how much money you want to put in a certain project, right? So
that's
in certain sense, or how much money you want to pay to buy a product, right? So let's say if you want to buy a mobile phone or something like that, right? One way to come up with a fair price or to determine a fair price for it is to objectively evaluate all the material value and technological value that has gone into it. Right. Yes.
Okay, I know everyone is tired and ready to leave, but just I'll take one more minute since this is the last day of the week for this meeting. So in one of Christian's slides, he showed some examples where individuals have to pay a cost to benefit others. And I'm going to add one more example to that list. So you often have to pay a significant cost to travel long distances, sometimes crossing oceans, to prepare lectures that will benefit other people. So I'm very thankful that many of you have decided to pay that cost, as it has definitely benefited a lot of people here. And special thanks to Jonathan, Professor Borkar, and Christian for giving these extended set of lectures. I think it has been a really stimulating experience for all the participants here. And also special thanks to the research seminar speakers for showcasing the really diverse kinds of interesting questions that one can ask and address under this topic. So, and thank you finally to the participants, whoever is still awake, for really engaging with the speakers. So have a good weekend, and for those of you who are leaving, so hopefully we will see you again soon. Thank you.